now that we have a good understanding of how to use the drawing tools in 2D, we want to begin drawing now in 3D. Before we can do that though, we need to understand how to navigate and orbit in SketchUp. Now all of your orbiting and zooming and panning tools are all located right here, but to be quite honest, I rarely use these here. I mostly use a 3-button mouse to zoom, pan, or orbit. Basically, with the 3-button mouse, you can scroll up and down to zoom in and out. You can click and hold on the middle mouse to bring up the orbit tool. And in that case, you can drag left or right. To pan in SketchUp, you can click on the pan tool here, or, which I prefer doing, you can click and hold on the middle mouse, and you can actually see the little shortcut there that I'm going to explain. You can hold down Shift as well. Now with the middle mouse clicked and Shift held down, it turns the orbit wheel into the pan tool. Now if you're not familiar with 3D applications or you haven't been in a 3D program for a while, what I find the easiest way to do when you're orbiting is to keep your cursor in this bottom range here, because you want to sort of turn around this area. Try to avoid being up here or up here. Either want to be sort of in the center, or I find it easiest to kind of orbit around this area here. Another good tip is get a good mouse. On a Mac, the Mighty Mouse or the Magic Mouse, the newer ones by Apple, they just flat out stink. They're not good for your hand, and they don't have a middle mouse feature, specifically the Magic Mouse. There are plugins that you can download that enable the middle mouse. I think it's called Magic Preferences, but you'll notice after a while it just really hurts your hand. So get yourself a simple 3-button mouse, either like a Logitech or Microsoft sells simple 3-button mice. It'll really help you navigate SketchUp a lot faster and more efficient and allow you to move through your model more quickly. Other ways that we can get into our model or view around is using the zoom tool. So you can zoom scrolling in and out, as I mentioned, but if you actually click on the zoom tool, which is Z as a keyboard shortcut, you can see here you can actually adjust the field of view. So if you want to see more of your model in your workspace, you can type in a larger field of view. So I can type in 60, press enter. That's going to give me 60 degrees of a visible angle. 60 degrees is good for interiors, 30 degrees is good for exteriors, but I really don't work in field of views. I try to think like a camera does and work in focal length. So if you want to work in focal length, you can actually change the degree amount to translate it to a millimeter amount. So if I want to work in 30 millimeters, I'll just type in 30 mm and press enter. And notice how it changes instead of field of view. It now says focal length here. So if you want a really wide angle shot, like 20 millimeters, or if you want a close up, type in 100, get a 100 millimeter shot. If you're just beginning though and just kind of working within the model, best place to start is at 30 degrees. And you can get back to degrees. Simply just type in 30 DEG and press enter, and it'll get you back to 30 degrees. The last tool in the zoom series is the zoom extents, and it does exactly that. It zooms to the extent of your model. I use this quite a bit. You can click on the tool here, or it's also keyboard shortcut Shift Z. And that's always great as you're working in a very detailed area of your model, and then you kind of want to zoom out and see what the rest of the scene looks like. Just press Shift Z, it'll zoom you out. Next, let's take a look how you can select in SketchUp, and then we'll begin drawing our roof pitches. Now that we know how to move around in SketchUp, let's go ahead and start drawing some of these basic roof pitches. To begin using one of the first modification tools, which is a push-pull tool, to create this gable roof, we first need to draw a rectangle that's 20 feet by 20 feet. Just going to pan and zoom in a little bit closer. And I set up some guides and just some measurements here just to make it a little bit easier for you if you're following along with the example file. Take the rectangle tool, start in the bottom corner, draw out, and you can either snap on that endpoint, or you can just type in 20 feet, 20 feet. Now once you have your surface there, you can extrude it using the push-pull, which is this tool here. P is also the keyboard shortcut for push-pull, and it's going to be one of the tools that you most often use in SketchUp. It's very simple to use. As you hover over a surface, you'll see it shade. You simply want to click and release to initiate your push-pull, move your cursor up, and then either click or type in the value or height that you want this to be. So I want this to be 12 feet, and I'll press enter. One of the great features of the push-pull tool is that it remembers your last push-pull distance. So we push this up 12 feet. If I hover my cursor over this new face here, a double click will repeat my last push-pull height. So this is great when you're doing a building massing model and you have several maybe city blocks or building blocks that you all want to repeat at the same height. You can just throw down a couple of rectangles, take the push-pull one up, double click to repeat. I'll just undo these to clean up the model space. So I'm just using Command Z or Control Z to undo. You could also remember we set this up here. You could click undo. Now to finish off this gable roof, I need to create the pitch. And there are several different ways in which you can create the pitch. The first one you may think of is actually using the line tool and drawing the profile similar to what we have further on in the space here. But we're going to do the simple way or the easy way to create that pitch. And that is with the line tool and then the move tool. With the line tool, you want to click from the midpoint and draw on the green axis until you hit the endpoint. And then you want to take the move tool, which is right here. It's also M as a keyboard shortcut. And you want to move this entire edge. You don't want to move the endpoint or the far endpoint. You don't want to move any of these edges because you'll get something like this that happens. You want to move just this line. So just click on that and you want to move it up in the blue axis. You can see that the line, the dotted line here is blue, letting us know that we're in the Z or blue axis. And what I can do here is I can actually either type in the height that I want, or I can infer to the height over there. Now to force it to infer, what I want to do is press the up arrow key, mainly because the up arrow key, after you press it, so I just pressed it, that actually locks your cursor in the blue direction. So regardless of where I move my mouse right now, it's going to constrain that line to only move up so that now I can hover my cursor and infer to this height right here, just 10 feet. I can simply click and it sets the model in place. Let's say this roof pitch right here, we want it at a 5:12 ratio. What you want to do first before you draw your line and move it up is you want to use the protractor tool and you want to draw a guide. And this guide is going to create a ratio of 5:12 that we can use then to get the angle that we desire. The protractor tool is a 3-click process. So the first click, you want to click on the endpoint. The second click is your reference angle or your 0 reference angle. In this case, you want to click somewhere on this edge. And then your third click, you can actually snap to these little tick marks on the protractor. It's going to snap every 15-degree increment. Or since we're using a ratio here, I can type in 5:12 and hit enter. And it's going to draw that guide at that angle. Next, we'll just take the line tool, draw from midpoint to midpoint. Now, instead of taking the move tool right away and selecting this line, we need to actually pre-select the line. That way we're selecting at this endpoint because the endpoint of the line is where our guide is. Select the line, then click the move tool, and it's important that we infer from this front point. So I'll click on that, move this up in the blue axis until you feel it snap to that edge. In that case, we have a 5:12 pitch. Now that we've seen how the push-pull and move tool can be used to create simple roof structures, let's use the follow me tool to create a little more complex structure, like the cross gable over here. Now, if you notice this, you'll see that it has a profile that wraps and extends over to this far edge. Now, just to create this with the push-pull or just with the line tool would be a lot of work. And instead, we're going to use the follow me tool with the profile to create it very easily. The first thing that we need to do is create our little addition here. You'll see here that we created a guide here that's going to allow us to draw a line. So take the line tool and just draw from this point here down in the blue axis to this point here. And you'll notice if you take the select tool or the spacebar is the shortcut for the select tool, you'll see that it creates two separate surfaces or faces. Take the push-pull tool highlight this surface, click once to extend the push-pull. And since I don't know that distance, but I know they're in the same plane, I can just hover my cursor and infer to that distance over there. So it looks like it's 9 feet, 3 3/8 of an inch. And inferring can work in any different axes or location. So I can infer to this point here. If I want the building maybe half the height, I could push-pull and infer maybe to the midpoint here. There's a lot of different ways that you can use inferencing while in push-pull. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to create a profile for our roof to follow, similar to the profile that we have over here. Now I'm going to take the tape measure tool. I'm going to measure this distance from the top point down just to see what it is. And it looks like it's 4 feet, 2 inches. Let's zoom back now. And we'll take the line tool and we'll draw a line from the midpoint here up in the blue axis. It's very critical that you go up in the blue axis. Depending on your view, it may look like you're drawing up, but you may in fact be on another axis. You can also see that it's inferring to that point. So I can infer to it, or I can simply just type in the value 4 feet 2. So you notice as I type in 4 feet 2 inches, I don't have to put the inch sign in the value control box. I can just leave it blank. That is because our default units is in inches. So I'll click there. Next, I'll draw a line down till I hit the endpoint here. Once you have your profile, you can now use the Follow Me tool to create the path that it's going to follow. Now there are 2 ways to do this. There's the hard way and the easy way. And we'll show you the hard way first, but you'll realize afterwards always to use the easy way. The hard way to use the Follow Me tool is by first clicking on the Follow Me tool, which is this tool here. You want to first click on the face that you want to extrude, which is this face here. And then you'll see the red line starting to highlight. And basically you just want to follow your cursor over the edges that you want it to follow. Now, because the cross gable, we don't want it to turn like this. We want it to stay flat here. We don't want to turn the corner. So we just want to leave it here. Once you follow the entire path, you can simply click and it'll create your profile. Now, as you can notice, it does create some extra geometry. And that's because the profile is longer than the addition that we have here. If I take the eraser and go to erase these edges, I'm going to lose more geometry that I need. For example, I need the line work here, and I need a couple of the lines there. To bring in those lines, simply just take the line tool and trace this point here. That's going to create that intersection. And I'm going to trace this point here to create that intersection for this surface here. Now you can take the eraser and you can erase the extra geometry. Now notice the profile followed and created this slope here. I can move that using the Move tool and just moving this edge out. Now remember earlier we used the up arrow to lock in the blue axis? Well, here we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to lock in the red axis. And you can do that with the right arrow key. Now you just have to click it. You don't have to hold down the right arrow key. You can click it and just infer to the face below and then click. Last but not least, I always like to keep my models very clean. So I like to take the eraser and just erase any extra edges that I don't need in my model. We'll even erase them over here too. The other way that you can use the Follow Me tool is by pre-selecting the path or the face and then clicking the Follow Me tool and just single clicking on the profile. And that's going to generate the entire wrap around for you, as shown in the hip roof here. You can do the same thing here for these 2 examples. So I can click on the face, click on the Follow Me and have it follow. And again, I could clean up some of that geometry. And for the overlaid hip, same thing. I could click on the face, click on the Follow Me, and click on the profile. Now, another thing to note, if you want it to follow just half or just a certain amount of lines, you can also, instead of just pre-clicking the face, you can pre-select the edges just so long as they're connected. And then I can click the Follow Me and follow that face. So see how it leaves this straight, like in our cross gable over here? It's another way that you can use the pre-selection In this case here, I'm going to take a line tool and just trace that edge right there. And now I can erase the extra geometry. If by accident you erase a line that you shouldn't have, like that line right there, don't worry, just take the line tool and just trace back in that line, and you'll essentially heal the surface and heal those edges. The Mansard roof is one of my favorite roof structures. To create it in SketchUp, we need to use the offset tool and a feature called auto fold that's going to allow us to move the plane up in the blue axes. Now, a little tip about the Mansard roof is its shape is really iconic and characteristic because back in the 17 and 1800s, you were taxed on the number of floors you had in your house. And because this area of it was essentially the attic or roof space, it didn't count as a floor, although the ceiling heights were high enough to adequately house any number of bedrooms that you could fit in the shell of the house. Now, to create it, we could use follow me as we did in the previous ones, but it's a lot easier using offset and autofold to bevel the edges up. First thing we're going to use is the offset tool, which is right here. It's also F as a keyboard shortcut. I'm just going to offset the outer edge. If you're familiar with AutoCAD, offset doesn't work the same way in SketchUp as it does in AutoCAD. For example, in AutoCAD, you offset by clicking on an edge and then moving inward or outward. SketchUp, however, really just is referencing the face, and you just want to look and verify where that red dot is, because that's your reference point. So I can infer here. I'll simply click once to start my offset, and my second click can now either be inside or outside. And it's just important to note to have your cursor in that direction before you type in the value that you want to offset. We're going to offset 2 feet. So I'm going to move in. I could either type in 2 feet, or if you want to type in inches instead of feet, just type in 24. Now remember, like the push-pull tool, that it remembers your last push-pull distance? Offset tool works the same way. So if you need to create a stepped pyramid here, you can double-click, find the face, double-click, find the face, and double-click. It's a great way for creating a stepped pyramid. So if you wanted to, then you could push-pull these up, all at different heights, and then double-click. Let me undo, just to get back to our Mansard roof. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we need to extrude this up, and I believe it is 4 feet. So first thing you might think to do is to take the push-pull tool and push-pull this up 4 feet. It will work, but you have a lot of extra geometry now that you have to create. You'd have to take the line tool and basically just retrace in all of these edges. If you click on the X-ray mode, which is this little mode right here, you'll see it creates all that extra geometry inside your model. And if you're slightly OCD like myself, you'll want a clean model without any visible geometry that you don't need. So I'm just going to undo. And instead of push-pulling, we're going to use auto-fold. Auto-fold is a feature within the Move tool. So if I click on the Move tool and I hover over this face, you can see at the bottom it says Command equals auto-fold. So if I click to activate my move, because I'm on this surface, it's sort of stuck to it, what I want to do is force it to go up in the blue axes. To do that, you just click Command and it enables auto-fold. You see a little folding part to the bottom right of the cursor. And now you can fold this up in the blue axes. And again, we want 4 feet. So now just type in 4, 8, enter. So that creates our initial bevel of that. If we want to adjust that, maybe we want it to pitch a little bit more, we can actually use the scale tool. So notice as I double click, it selects the surface and edges. A single click just selects the face, and a triple click selects the entire object. And this will be useful later on as you're selecting geometry in SketchUp. But for right now, we just want to double click, take the scale tool, and we get 9 green squares to pull from. We could pull uniform scale from opposite positions. We can pull from just the red scale or the red direction or the green direction. I want to pull from one of the angles because I want to keep it all in the same proportion. But as I'm pulling it, I don't want to pull it towards that one edge. I want to hold down Option to pull it from the center. So see how that reference point moves from the far corner to the center. And now I can bevel this in or out a little bit more. The last thing that we want to do is for runoff, we want to create that top pitch that is really subtle to see. And to do that, we're going to take the line tool and just draw an X across our model. That way we have 4 separate faces. And then take the move tool and move the center point up in the blue axis. And I'm just going to move this up 2 feet or 24 inches. Press enter. There you have it. Very simple Mansard roof. Next, we're going to finish up the modification tools by creating the Gambrel roof. Let's finish this lesson out by drawing the Gambrel roof. The Gambrel roof, or as I like to refer to it, the barnhouse roof, is pretty straightforward, although it does have a couple challenges as you draw it in SketchUp. First thing that we want to do is use the arc tool. And instead of 12 sides, let's go ahead and change that to 4. I'll type in 4 and hit enter. Now the trick when you're drawing this, remember the arc tool is a 3-click process. First click starting point, second's ending point, and third is the radius. You want to sort of orbit and view to force it to go in the blue axis. So you don't want to be down on the ground like this. You kind of want to be sort of at elevation with it. Click on my first click, and then my second, and then my third. You'll notice it is in fact going in that blue axis. And I'm going to bring this up 10 feet. So far, so good. When I go to push-pull this, notice what happens. And this happens with all arcs as well as circles. See how it is hiding or smoothing the endpoints. We don't want that. I'm just going to undo. Before you extrude this, if you take the select tool, you'll notice that this is one entire polyline. What you want to do is right-click or context click and explode the curve. That is now going to break it up into 4 separate segments. You can now take the push-pull and just extrude to that face. Good thing to note when you're push-pulling this, always try to push-pull and infer to a point. Don't just push-pull and sort of stop arbitrarily. Make sure you push-pull this and you have some sort of reference point. Could be the end point, could be the edge, could be the midpoint, just so long as you have a point there. That's really critical because when I come back through with the eraser, I can erase this front edge and I can erase the back edge to make it nice and clean. And same with this one over here. So there you have it. There's a couple different roof pitches that you can create in SketchUp. See this little guide that's still hanging out here? You can erase guides. You just take the eraser and erase that. You can also go to Edit, Delete Guides. We'll show that a little bit further on as well. So now that you have a basic understanding of how the tools work in 2D, as well as how they work in 3D with some of these roof pitches, we can now begin the workflow of creating a house. And we're going to work from a 2D, from drawing the floor plan based off of our own measurements. And then we're going to extrude those into 3D and add a lot of different detail, like doors and windows, furniture, staircases, ceilings and walls, all the detail that any house or any 3D model would have to really create a nice and elegant rendering for our 3D model.